I laid bricks for 20 years, helped build the CEO's mansion, even taught his kid how to hold a trowel. Then they fired me and blackballed my name across the union. So I made a move that destroyed their legacy. See what happened? My name's Ray. I lay brick. 20 years I did it without missing a shift, without cutting a line. Rain, frost, 104-degree heat, none of it mattered. If the mortar could hold, so could I. I don't have degrees or plaques. What I have are scars, 2 herniated discs, and a trowel grip in my fingers so natural I forget I'm holding it. People used to say I built half this town with my hands. They meant it as a compliment. Now it feels more like a curse, because the same hands that raised the walls of the CEO's mansion, that showed his boy how to level a brick, those are the hands they threw away like yesterday's call sheet. Let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Randy Barnes from Huddersfield. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. It didn't come with a warning. No meeting. No handshake. Just a short, typed letter from corporate with no return address, no name, no soul. They blamed downsizing. Said the company was moving toward more cost-efficient workflows. As if I hadn't spent years making sure their corners never cracked. As if loyalty was something they leased from me like a backhoe. I remember staring at that envelope, mortar still under my nails, while the foreman avoided eye contact like I'd just died. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because that's the sound your body makes when it breaks in slow motion and the pain hasn't caught up yet. I didn't know about the blacklist until a week later. I called 3 other crews, guys I'd trained, guys who used to drink from my cooler. Each gave me the same awkward pause, the same excuse, some version of "we're fully staffed," or "upper management doesn't want to bring in any heat." One guy, Pete, finally cracked and said, "Ray, they put your name out. Said you cost too much, stir things up. Said you had opinions." I wanted to ask him what kind of opinions get a man blackballed after giving half his damn spine to a company. But I didn't. I just hung up and stared at my trowel like it was a murder weapon I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. There's something sick about being erased while the thing you built still stands. I drive past the Carmichael mansion every day. I remember the way the limestone shimmered before we sealed it, how his wife wanted the patio redone twice because the sunset hit it at the wrong angle. I was there when his son turned 7 and dropped his little toy truck in the wet mix. I could have yelled, but I didn't. Instead, I laughed and showed him how to smooth it out, told him, "Now you know. It sets fast." That same kid, years later, interned at corporate. Probably had a hand in the meeting where they decided I was just too expensive to keep around. That's how it works, right? The next generation cashes in on the loyalty the last one bled for. My phone didn't ring much after that. The union didn't call. No severance, no pension transfer, no arbitration. Just silence. I thought about fighting it. But the idea of walking into one of those marble-floored HR offices and begging for a job felt worse than laying bricks in hell. And there's a thing that happens to a man when the one thing he gave his life to, his craft, is turned against him. It doesn't make you loud. It doesn't make you violent. It makes you quiet, focused. It makes you start thinking about legacy, not just survival. For a while, I just sat. Didn't sleep much. Didn't eat right. My wife kept asking if I was okay, and I kept saying, "Just tired." But the truth is, I wasn't tired. I was blank. I was a man without function. Every morning, I'd walk to the garage, sit on the bench by my tools, and just stare at the handle of my level like it could tell me who I was supposed to be now. Then one day, I did something small. I went to the back patio, tore up a few loose bricks I'd always meant to fix, and relaid them. Not because anyone would notice, but because I needed to remember that my hands still knew how to make something right. They thought they ended me. That they buried me in a shallow grave of bureaucracy and cold policy. But what they didn't know, and what I was just beginning to realize, was that I'd been building something all along. Not for them. Not even for me, yet. But for the day I'd stop surviving and start shaping something of my own. Because I didn't just lay their foundation, I understood it. And you can't fake that. You can't fabricate 20 years of sweat, precision, and pride. The difference between a house and a fortress isn't the design, it's the intent behind every single brick. And I was about to start building with a whole new kind of intent. I didn't leave town right away. That would have made it too easy for them to forget me. Instead, I stayed in the shadows of the structures I'd helped raise, walked the edges of job sites like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. The young guys wouldn't meet my eyes. The older ones, the ones who used to swear beside me under July sun, just nodded and looked away. I was radioactive now, a man marked not by what he'd done wrong, but by what he knew too well. There's a quiet violence in being erased. Not shouted down, not dragged out, just quietly scrubbed from the story like you were never there to begin with. That silence has a weight to it. You carry it in your chest, heavy and shifting, like wet cement that never quite sets. When I finally left, I didn't tell anyone. No goodbye party, no big declaration. Just loaded up the truck with tools and clothes and one old Polaroid from the side of my first solo build, a chimney so clean and plumb the inspector shook my hand twice. I drove east until the highway numbers stopped meaning anything. Landed in a town with bad lighting and cheaper concrete, where people didn't care about my name, just whether I showed up sober and early. They paid in cash. No questions, no paperwork, no health plan. It wasn't work, it was penance. And maybe that's what I needed. Not to fight. Not yet. Just to remember what it felt like to start from the bottom without the illusion that anyone would catch me if I slipped. The place I worked was nothing like what I'd known. No hard hats, no safety meetings, just a ragtag crew of temp laborers who'd lost more than they built. Most of them didn't speak much English, and even if they did, they didn't ask questions. That was the unspoken rule. You do your work, take your envelope, and disappear until tomorrow. I was the oldest guy on the site by at least 15 years, and the only one who brought his own trowel. They laughed at me for that, at first. But then they watched the lines I pulled, dead straight, no sag, no tilt, and the laughing stopped. After a while, they started calling me maestro. I didn't smile when they said it. I just nodded, laid another course, and kept my eyes down. That word didn't belong to me anymore. Not yet. At night, I stayed in a rented room above a laundromat that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. I'd sit on the floor, back against the wall, and draw out foundation plans in a notebook I never let anyone see. Not because I thought I'd forget how to build, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to plan something for myself. For 20 years, I laid brick for other people's empires. Now, every line I drew was a small rebellion. A sketch of something they couldn't own. I wasn't dreaming of revenge, not yet. I was dreaming of precision, of craftsmanship, of building something no one could tear down with a memo. The turning point came one evening after a 10-hour shift when a kid named Diego pulled me aside. He couldn't have been more than 20, as full of whatever comes after hunger but before hope. He asked if I could show him how I kept my joints so clean. I should have told him to buzz off. Should have kept my head down. But something about the way he asked, respectful, honest, cut through the cement around my ribs. So I showed him. Slow, deliberate. Let him feel the rhythm, the angle, the weight transfer. He got it fast. Smiled like it meant something. That night, I stared at my hands for a long time. They were cracked, calloused, ugly. But they still had purpose. Maybe even power. And that was dangerous knowledge. I stayed another 8 months. During that time, I watched. Not just the workers, but the foremen, the subcontractors, the paper trails that passed through greasy hands before becoming cement pours. I learned who skimmed what, which suppliers cut their mix, which project managers took kickbacks and blamed the crew when foundations buckled. I didn't say a word, just watched and logged it all, dates, prices, names, in a mental ledger no one could erase. I wasn't angry anymore. I was preparing. Because that's the thing they never taught in all those years I gave them. Silence isn't surrender. Sometimes, silence is scaffolding. And what you build in it is far stronger than rage. The day I left, I didn't take my final paycheck. I left it in the envelope on the folding table where we clocked out, wrote, "Buy better gloves" on the front, and walked out without looking back. I drove home a different man. Not in the way that movies like to paint it, with fire in his eyes and a shotgun under the seat, but in the way a mason returns to his site with blueprints in his pocket that no one else knows exist. I wasn't there to pick up where I left off. I was there to lay something new, something surgical, quiet, clean. When I pulled into my old driveway, the weeds had taken over. Cracks had spread along the concrete like veins under dry skin. I stared at them for a long time. Then I got out, walked to the back patio, the one I rebuilt when I was lost, and stood there in the silence. Not mourning, not even angry, just present. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't running. I was returning, and they wouldn't see me coming. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't loud. It's patient. It waits until the mortar is fully set. And mine was nearly cured. There's no glory in starting from scratch. No music swells when you cold call old enemies to ask who's hiring. And there's sure as hell no applause when your name makes a room go quiet. But I wasn't looking for glory. I was looking for friction, the kind that grinds you back into shape. I started with a single ad taped to a corkboard at the back of a rundown diner where contractors still drank coffee like it meant something. It read, Mason crew forming. Real work. No shortcuts. No cowards. Underneath, just a number. No name. If they knew, they wouldn't call. If they didn't, I'd find out who still believed in the work, not the politics. The first man who showed up was Manny, a former welder who hadn't touched steel since he got his wrist broken in a union scuffle 5 years back. Said he still had the shakes, but only when he drank, which, according to him, was less and less lately. Then came Tino, quiet guy with a neck tattoo of a burning rose and a resume full of fired jobs and unspoken pain. He didn't smile, just asked, "You pay cash?" I said, "For now." Then one morning, this kid named Josh rode up on a bike held together with duct tape. Looked about 15, but swore up and down he was 21. I almost sent him away. Then he pulled out a handmade tool pouch and said, "My dad was a brickie. Taught me how to feather the mud." I let him stay, not because I trusted him, but because I recognized the ache in his voice. The first job we took wasn't glamorous. Retaining wall for a trailer park that kept flooding every winter. No permits, no oversight, barely enough room for scaffolding. But we laid it like it was sacred. Straight, clean, bonded. I made them redo the first course 3 times until the line held level in the sun with no shadow gaps. They grumbled, but they stayed. Because when the neighbors came out and offered beers after, saying, "That wall looks like it'll last longer than we will," I saw it in their eyes. That flicker of pride trying to come back to life. The kind you can't fake. The kind they hadn't felt in years. I never told them who I was or where I'd come from. They called me Ray, just Ray, and that was enough. I didn't need to drag my past into it. The story I was writing now didn't need a back cover. But word spreads in this line of work. Contractors talk. Subs share stories. One day, we landed a bid for a small commercial plaza. I knew whose hands had wanted that job. Their logo had been on the pre-bid list, scratched out after our price came in 20% under. I didn't say a word to the crew. Just handed them gloves, checked the chalk lines, and said, "Make it sing." And we did. For walls in 3 weeks. Clean edges. Tight joints. Inspector said he hadn't seen work like that in 10 years. That plaza job changed things. Suddenly, we weren't the weird no-name crew anymore. We were the team that undercut Carmichael Stone and billed and delivered early. Calls started coming in faster than I could answer. Developers. Renovators. Even the city asked if we'd bid on a public library expansion. I played it careful. Took jobs that meant something. Projects with visibility. But never more than we could handle. Because this wasn't about money. It was about erosion. Slow, methodical, inevitable. Every job we took was one they didn't. Every contract signed in my favor was another crack in their legacy. And we weren't just winning. We were building something better. Still, I never forgot what they did. The blackballing. The silent erasure. So I kept a file. A folder in my garage full of bid sheets, contract losses, whispers from subs about sudden layoffs on their side. I didn't gloat. Didn't show it to anyone. But every time I filed another page, I felt it. Like adding one more course to a wall they couldn't tear down. And the irony wasn't lost on me. They taught me the system, gave me the tools. Thought they were shaping a loyal laborer. But what they actually built was someone who understood every weakness in their blueprint. Someone who could take their empire apart, not with fire, but with finesse. Josh started writing to jobs with me. Said he wanted to learn more, not just about laying brick, but about running the show. I gave him quiet lessons. How to read a site before the first shovel hits dirt. How to tell when concrete's going bad just by the smell. How to talk to inspectors so they trust you without realizing they're being managed. He soaked it up. One day, he asked why I pushed so hard. Why I always double-checked every line, even when it wasn't mine to lay. I didn't answer at first. Just let the silence sit between us while I buttered a block. Then I said, because everything you don't fix now will crack later. That's true in concrete, and it's true in people. That night, I found a letter in my mailbox. No stamp. Just folded once, typed, and signed. It read, "We know what you're doing. It won't last. You're nothing without our name." I read it twice. Then I laughed. Not the bitter kind, the real kind. Because they were wrong. I wasn't nothing without their name. I was proof their name never meant what they thought it did. Their empire was built on cost-cutting, corner-slicing, and a polished brand. Mine was being built on something they couldn't trademark: craft. Integrity. The kind of pride that gets passed down, not bought out. The crew never saw the letter. They didn't need to. What mattered was the next wall, the next foundation, the next job where we showed up and proved that clean work and quiet resolve could still win. I didn't need billboards or TV ads. I had mortar. I had alignment. And I had a growing list of clients who didn't care about the name on the truck. Just whether the work would outlast the next storm. And deep down, I knew. I wasn't just building a business. I was laying the first row of bricks on their grave. Some people swing hammers to tear things down. I swing a trowel to remind people what they forgot. That's what I told myself the first time I laid brick on the side of a private school with the Carmichael family crest etched into the stone lintel. Except now, that crest would sit above masonry done by the man they erased. No one knew it but me. The headmaster cut the ribbon like it was just another line item on a donation spreadsheet. The kids smiled for pictures. But I kept my hard hat low and my gloves on tight. Because legacy doesn't get destroyed with explosions. It rots from the inside, one clean line at a time, until the name carved in stone starts to mean nothing. I took jobs that meant something to them. Quietly. Methodically. The Carmichaels had spent years stamping their name on this city like royalty, sponsoring amphitheaters, endowing libraries, donating fountains with plaques, and flowers no one watered. And slowly, job by job, I took each of those structures back, not with sabotage, not with lawsuits or protests, but with something much more permanent. Craftsmanship. No one argues with a perfect wall. No one questions a foundation that doesn't sink. 1 month, we rebuilt the stone terrace at the church where Carmichael's daughter got married. 2 months later, we restored the front steps of the hospital wing he donated in his father's name. Every stone I touched was one they used to claim. But now it bore my lines, my bond, my precision. And they couldn't stop it, because I never left a fingerprint. I drive by the old mansion sometimes. Not to stalk it, just to see what time had done to it. I noticed the gutter seams were beginning to split where the copper met the stone. The retaining wall on the side yard had begun to tilt ever so slightly, the kind of flaw only someone like me would catch. But what caught my eye most wasn't the structure. It was the stillness. No workers. No landscapers. No trucks. Just silence. A house like that only stays pristine with constant upkeep. When the money slows, the cracks start whispering. I parked across the street once, just for a minute, and thought about the boy who used to run through those halls dragging a toy truck and asking about mortar. I wondered if he remembered my name, or if I'd been edited out like bad footage from a home video. The crew started to notice a shift. Tino pulled me aside after a job and said, "You got something going, don't you? This ain't just work to you." I didn't lie. I just told him, every man's got something to prove. I'm just proving mine in brick. He nodded, like that was enough. And it was. Because by then, they weren't just working for a paycheck. They were learning. Asking questions. Taking pride. Josh started staying late just to practice his bond lines. Manny brought in his nephew to apprentice. Even Diego, who rarely spoke above a whisper, started calling out measurements without being asked. We weren't just building structures. We were rebuilding belief. And that scared the hell out of the people who thought they'd buried mine. I started turning down jobs from certain developers. Ones I knew were still loyal to Carmichael's brand. Let them wonder why. Let them feel that absence like a draft through a cracked window. Meanwhile, we landed a contract restoring the stonework on a civic monument, a park with a commemorative bench donated by the Carmichael Foundation a decade back. The bench had cracked through the center, split by frost and time. We pulled it apart piece by piece, reinforced the footing, and set it back so clean you'd think it had never failed. When the rededication came, there were photos, press, even a Carmichael cousin giving a brief speech about lasting contributions. I watched from a distance, arms crossed, gloves tucked in my belt. Nobody thanked us. That was fine. I wasn't there for thanks. I was there so the name on that plaque would sit atop my work, not theirs. That's how you rewrite history, quietly, under the surface, with precision and patience. One night, Josh asked me if we'd ever put our name on a building. Something real. Something permanent. I looked at him and said, "Our name's already on everything we do. We just don't carve it in stone." He didn't get it at first, but I saw the way he looked at the walls after that. Like he was starting to understand. You don't need monuments when your legacy is built into every inch of what you've made right. Besides, monuments are easy to tear down. Real work, that survives the people who funded it. Then came the country club job. A full rebuild of the East Garden wall and fountain, originally commissioned by Carmichael's firm as a vanity project, all flashy tile and sloppy load-bearing. The current board hated it, said it looked cheap, asked around for someone who could fix it without the drama. My name came up. Not Ray Carmichael's ex-guy. Just Ray, the mason with the ghost quiet crew that never cuts corners. We took the job. Rebuilt the wall with reclaimed limestone and natural fall lines that blended into the landscaping like it grew there. I added a water return system that reduced erosion runoff by half. No one asked me to. I just knew it needed to be done. 3 days after the job wrapped, I got a voicemail. A voice I hadn't heard in years. Cold. Familiar. "I know what you're doing, Ray. Don't think I don't see it. I didn't delete it. I saved it. Played it twice. Then once more in the truck with the windows down and the sunset bleeding over the job site." He still thought this was about him. About revenge. He didn't understand that what I was building wasn't retaliation, it was replacement. I wasn't dragging him down. I was making him irrelevant. And the best part? He couldn't stop it. It didn't come in the form of a lawsuit or a cease and desist. That would have been too obvious. Too public. No. When Carmichael finally decided to confront me, he did it the way people like him always do. Through proxies, through whispers, through sudden phone calls from city inspectors and supply vendors who'd been working with me just fine until suddenly, they weren't. My orders got delayed. My permits hung in limbo. My crew got questioned at sites by people flashing badges they didn't quite have the authority to use. It wasn't sabotage, it was friction. Enough to make me bleed time, miss deadlines, maybe even crack under pressure. But here's the thing. Pressure doesn't crack brick that's been properly cured. And I had taken my time curing this. When the friction didn't slow me down, the silence broke. He showed up. Not at my house, not at a job site. At the diner where I posted my first flyer. Same corner booth, same coffee stain laminate. I walked in, and he was just sitting there, sleeves rolled, gold watch catching the morning sun like it could still impress someone. He didn't stand. Just nodded and said, "Sit down, Ray." I stood there for a second, staring at him like he was a ghost. But ghosts don't age. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer. A little bloated, like a man who used to matter and was still trying to remember what that felt like. I sat. "You think you're clever," he said. No small talk. No apology. Just that slow, smug tone of a man still convinced the world owed him an audience. Undercutting bids. Poaching jobs. "You think you want something here?" I didn't answer. Just stirred the cream into my coffee, slow and deliberate. He leaned in, voice lower. "You don't have the reach. You don't have the name. All you're doing is scratching at something bigger than you'll ever understand." That's when I smiled. Not to provoke him. Not to mock. Just because he still didn't get it. This wasn't about reach. It was about roots. And his? They were rotting. "You remember your kid?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. He used to follow me around job sites. Ask questions. Real questions. Not the kind you ask to be polite, the kind you ask when you want to understand how something stands. That got him. Just a flicker behind the eyes. I showed him how to hold a trowel, how to pull a clean line. He got it right on the third try. You know what he said? Carmichael didn't answer. He said, if I can build something this strong, maybe it'll stay up even when I'm not around. I let that sit. Your kid understood more about legacy at 7 than you ever will. He looked away for a second, jaw tightening, then said, you think these clients care? You think the mayor knows your name? They work with you because you're cheap. That's it. The second someone else offers better, you're gone. I leaned forward, slow. They don't remember my name. They remember the work. They remember the way it held after the first storm. They remember that no one had to call back and fix my corners. I pulled a folded blueprint from my jacket and slid it across the table. This is the next job. City Museum expansion. Big contract. Bid went out last month. He didn't open it. He didn't have to. He already knew. That was mine, he said, voice low. We were promised that job. I nodded. Yeah. Until they saw our wall at the community center. The one with the curved edge you said couldn't be done on budget. I stood then, left my coffee untouched. You keep thinking this is about you. It's not. I'm not trying to destroy your name. I'm just proving it was never built to last. I walked out before he could answer. That's the thing about people like him. They always need the last word. So when you leave them in silence, it feels like a collapse. The fallout came quiet. Quieter than I expected. Rumors of layoffs. A city project pulled mid-process for material concerns. A foreman I once worked under suddenly let go after 30 years. Carmichael stone and build didn't fall in a day. It didn't burn. It cracked. Slowly. Invisibly. Like a wall built on a rushed foundation. Each hairline split, a consequence of arrogance no rebar could fix. My crew didn't ask questions when we started getting more calls. They were too busy working. Too busy taking pride. And that, more than anything, was the real revenge. Watching these men stand taller with every job we finished, knowing we earned every inch. One morning, I found a fresh envelope on my truck windshield. Inside, a business card. No name, just the company logo, his company, torn down the middle and taped back together. I knew what it meant. He was asking if there was a way back in. If we could meet. Maybe talk merger. Partnership. Control. I didn't even tear it up. Just drove out to the old job site behind the abandoned hardware store where we practiced joints in the early days. Took a shovel. Dug 6 inches down. Set the card in concrete. Smooth. Level. Buried it. Some things don't get rebuilt. There's a moment, right after the last brick is set, when you step back and see the wall for what it is. Not just structure, not just labor, but proof. Proof that you were here. That your hands meant something. That what you built might stand after your name is gone. I stood in front of the school we'd just finished. Small place. Nothing fancy. Just a single-story trades academy with wide windows and walls built thick enough to outlast a century of storms. No plaque. No headlines. Just mortar and memory. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was fighting anymore. I felt like I was home. It started as an idea I scribbled on the back of a receipt. Build a place that teaches hands to matter. I didn't think anyone would fund it. But then the jobs kept rolling in. The crew kept growing. And the stories started changing. Contractors who used to avoid my number started referring me without hesitation. They stopped asking who I was and started asking how I trained my guys. City officials began showing up at our ribbon cuttings. One even asked if I'd consider consulting for a new apprenticeship program. I told him I wasn't a consultant. I was a mason. He said, that's exactly why we want you. I didn't smile. Just nodded. There was nothing left to prove. Only work to keep doing. The school opened in spring. 6 students. 3 were fresh out of high school. 2 were veterans. One was a single mother whose hand shook the first time she picked up a joiner. They came with different reasons, but the same question behind their eyes, can I build something that lasts? I didn't lecture them. Didn't pass out syllabi. I just took them out back to the training wall and said, lay a line. Some did it wrong. Some got it close. But all of them stayed. Because I didn't teach with diagrams. I taught with silence, with corrections made in real time, with hands side by side until the rhythm clicked into place. And when it did, when they stepped back and saw their own clean line, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time, belief being born right in front of me. One afternoon, Josh walked through the workshop with a clipboard in his hand and that same focused look he had back when we laid our first wall together. He'd grown into the kind of leader you don't notice until everything around him runs smooth. I watched him give quiet direction, check measurements, adjust a student's stance without saying more than 5 words. After class, he came up and said, "They listen to me now. Not because I talk louder, but because I build straighter." I clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Exactly. Let the wall speak. If it's right, they'll hear it." He nodded, and I realized something else. I wasn't just building foundations anymore. I was stepping away from them, knowing they'd hold. I still passed the Carmichael mansion sometimes. The place looked different now. Not ruined, just forgotten. A property company bought it and tried to rent it out for events, but the bookings dried up. The fountain didn't work anymore. Ivy started creeping over the stone. A few years ago, I might have smiled at that, called it poetic. But standing there now, I just felt tired. That house was built to impress, not to endure. And that was always the difference. He thought permanence was about price. I knew it was about care. About what you couldn't see, the cure time, the drainage slope, the unseen layers that kept it all from collapsing under its own weight. One morning, I saw his car parked down the street. Carmichael. Just sitting there, alone, staring up at the house like it was a tombstone. He didn't see me, and I didn't go over. Not because I was afraid, and not because I was angry. I just didn't need anything from him anymore. Not explanation. Not apology. That was the part of revenge nobody talks about. The moment it ends quietly, not with justice or applause, but with a sense that you're free from needing either. I left him there in the silence he created. Because some men die long before their hearts stop beating. They just don't know it until the world forgets how to say their name. We finished a library extension last week. Nothing dramatic, just a sunroom with long brick columns and benches built into the walls. The head librarian walked up to me after the final inspection and said, "This feels peaceful." I told her that's what a well-set wall should feel like. Not flashy, not loud, just right. She asked if we had a name for our company. I thought about it, then said, "Stone Quiet." She smiled, wrote it down for her files. That was the first time I'd said it out loud. Stone Quiet. No logo, no tagline. Just a name that felt like what we'd become, unshakable in our silence, proud without pageantry. Somewhere in the back of the workshop, the students were laying another practice wall. You could hear the scrape of the trowel, the soft thunk of bricks set into place. No shouting, no rush, just the rhythm. I stood there listening, hands in my pockets, and realized I'd stopped waiting for the next storm to hit. Because I wasn't surviving anymore. I wasn't climbing. I wasn't hiding. I was standing on something I'd built, and it was strong enough to hold. If this story hit something real for you, if you've ever been cast aside, underestimated, or told you were replaceable, then make sure to subscribe. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're a reminder that quiet strength, patience, and purpose always outlast the noise. Stick around. The next one might just be yours. See you soon.